All right, so Mike has set the cruise control at 60, and that is activating our lean burn mode. So we're at about 517, 519. That last run was our final max effort horsepower run, so now the car is fully tuned for performance.
That part of the table is also very localized, where it's not going to be used very often other than when we're at 60 miles an hour in 6th gear.
So this is where we get to have our cake and eat it too. We can have the power and the fuel economy. We'll see if we can get close to 40 on this trip. Let's hit the fuel thing. What are we at? Wow, that is really, really good. Welcome back to LegitStreetCars. My name is Alex, and today we are at Straightline Performance in New Lenox, Illinois with Mike from Hac Tuning, so we can tune my EcoVette for more power and for better fuel economy, because I'm a firm believer that you can have your cake and eat it too. And if you guys have never tried panettone, it's an Italian cake, kind of bready loaf thing. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. This is the chocolate panettone, but they have the original that has fruit in it. It's so good. I'd leave a link down below, but I don't think you can order panettone online. All right, guys, this is Mike from Hac Tuning, and something he's gonna show us right now is something I didn't realize on the Mustang dyno, but you can actually plug in the type of vehicle so that it's loaded properly. And this is kind of a big reason why you guys use these loaded dynos.
Yeah, and this was the reason back in 2004 that we got this dyno. And this was one of the first Mustang dynos in Illinois back in 2004, beginning in 2005. And as you can see on the screen here, I have this database set up that's provided by the EPA. Pick Corvette, which is right there. And then you got the 5.7 liter option, and E means everything. Automatic or manual doesn't matter. So once I have that, I select that data, and it pulls this in. And as you can see, you have 3,500 pounds. And then most importantly, you have this horsepower at 50 number. And what that does is, that is a rating of how much horsepower it takes to push this object at 50 miles an hour on a straight level road. And that's, instead of using a coefficient of drag, that's what the EPA started using in the 70s, and the database has been consistent ever since then. So on this dyno, instead of rolling and just moving a 2,500 pound roller, there's a 2,500 pound roller plus a braking force done by a magnetic brake to simulate the difference in weight. And then as you increase speed, it's able to extrapolate air resistance by applying more brake force based on that horsepower at 50 number.
So this is as real world as it can get. I mean, you're basically fine tuning the dyno for every specific car.
Right, and the only way you could even get more is if you had a big fan to actually start getting ram air effect. But in real world, this is as closest to the street or the track as you could get on a dyno.
Perfect.
So the first test that we're going to do is a baseline simulation, and this is using those inputs that we put into the computer to replicate what the car is doing on the road. I'm using this in part to get the car up to operating temperature so that my tests are consistent, and also just to start getting some baseline information based on the factory tune that's in the car. Once we do that, I'm going to sync the engine RPM and the dyno RPM for our baseline horsepower pull, so we have a baseline number for comparison.
All right, let's see what this 20-year-old C5 made with a stock tune. And we are at 347 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque. And that's pretty good for a quote-unquote 345 horsepower C5. And that's engine horsepower from the factory, so.
Yeah, I was definitely not expecting that. It did a lot better than I expected for all intents and purposes, a stock car. Other than, I believe, a colder engine.
Yeah, and it's got the little muffler thing going on back there. Awesome. That is awesome. I did see at the top end here a little squiggly line. That's probably valve float.
Yeah, typically we see about 5,200 RPM range. If you start seeing a little bit of a squiggly line, that's the peak cylinder pressure, and that's when you're going to see a lot of issues, whether it's going to be spark cutout or valve flow, and to me that looks like valve flow.
All right, well at this point I'll take it.
So this is the data log from this pull, and as you can see right here, this red line right here, that's engine retard, engine knock. And you can see we're getting about 28 degrees of timing is what we'd expect. And as soon as the engine started picking up knock, we got 7 degrees of knock and it pulled about 7 degrees of timing out of that car. That's about at the same RPM that we saw the valve float and the waves on the torque curve. So it's probably both things going on. We'll see how much we could clean up with the timing curve and see if the valve springs are an issue we need to address at some other time.
Okay, so right now we're going to be uploading your performance tune.
Yes, I'm going to go through the stock factory file from it, and I'm going to start with my baseline tune, so to speak, and it's just a very basic tune that changes a lot of parameters so I can start collecting good data. Good data in, good data out, and it just makes everything go a little bit quicker. I'm going to go through some drive cycles just collecting data and making the changes. Once I'm happy at everything about 4,000 RPM or so, we start doing wide open throttle pulls.
All right, so while Mike is working on the tune for the Corvette, I got to show you some cool cars that they got going on here. So this is a big time GM, this is a big time LS type of shop. So we have a bunch of stuff that is LS swapped. We have an Impala here, LS engine. We have another Impala with your LS engine. And then of course, a bunch of Corvettes, Camaros, a couple of GTOs, and this guy right here. This is fantastic. They found this car in Wyoming. It has just about the perfect patina. It was actually a school bus, and they are gonna clear coat over it the way it is. And check out the engine it currently has. So this 1953 International has the original straight 6, which is about to get yanked out for, what do we got going in this thing, Nick?
We're putting a 6-liter LS in it with a 4L60. The car is currently already sitting on coilovers, 9-inch suspension, rear end, everything like that. The interior's already done. We're gonna run LS factory style computer. We're gonna obviously tune it on the dyno, but custom wheels, keep it patina, clear over it, kind of just like preserve it in the state it's in. But a pretty cool school bus that came out of Wyoming.
One thing I wanted to point out is that we are measuring the air-fuel ratio post-catalytic converter. So this car just has a catback exhaust, still has the factory cats. Some of you guys may be wondering why we didn't drill a bung into the exhaust before the cat. And that is because Mike has done a bunch of testing on cars where it's not really realistic to be drilling through people's exhaust on a stockish car. And he's done a bunch of testing to where there is a negligible difference in the O2 sensor reading. Now, if you're going to install a wideband setup on your car and you have to put the sensor in the exhaust anyway, of course, drill it pre-cat. But in these situations on the dyno, Mike's done extensive testing over the last couple decades of doing this, and it is not a big difference.
At this point, I've started constructing the base fuel table. And this base fuel table is used for the idle, the startup, the part throttle cruising, and wide open throttle. We're running in speed density, so we have no mass airflow sensor input. It's still connected, the computer sees it, but it's ignoring that data completely. This is the map that I've started to construct, and I'm fairly confident in getting really close to my tolerances up to about 4,000 RPM. Above 4,000 RPM, I can no longer use narrowband data, and I'm going to start relying on the wideband more and more. The reason why that this fuel table is so important is because what it's doing is it's constructing a model of the air going into the vehicle. And once the vehicle knows the amount of air going in, given a certain RPM and certain vacuum, it's able to extrapolate how much fuel is needed at that time. And what I'm trying to do is make it so that my O2 correction, my tolerance with that is between 0 and -4%. So it's a very small threshold. And that's why you see a little bit of waves and dips, and you get this overall shape. Now, once you go into wide open throttle, if your fuel trim, your long-term fuel trim is positive, that percentage will get carried over to wide open throttle and you'll be running richer than you want. So I want to make sure that I have no cells that have a positive value as well. Now, as far as what we're going to try to get the most fuel economy out of it, is based on the data log. I know that at 60 miles an hour in 6th gear, I'm running about 1,200 RPM and 12 to 15% throttle position. And when you go into HP Tuner's speed density enhanced operating system, we get this table right here. And this will allow us to change the command of the air-fuel ratio based on RPM and throttle position. So those two cells that I have highlighted right now have a value in 1. So they're a multiplier. 1 times whatever is that number. What I'm going to do is reduce that number by about 10% to try to pull 10% fuel out at those cells activated by the pedal position and the RPM. Next thing I want to do is I want to try to crank the timing up too. This will allow for more power to be extracted per unit of fuel, hopefully reducing the amount of fuel needed at that mile an hour.
And Mike, in my first video, I had mentioned that we would be experimenting with open loop tuning, because it was my understanding that we didn't want the O2s kind of interrupting and bringing it back down to 14.7 to 1. But what you're explaining is that you're actually changing the command. So we can still use closed loop, so we'll still have O2 sensor correction at basically every other point in the map, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's the understanding of the way these tables are supposed to work together. I have to say, when me and you started talking about this, I was very excited. I've never actually done a fuel economy tune, and I've had these ideas in my head for years. So this has actually given me a chance to put a lot of theory into practice. Worst case, it doesn't work, and we could turn off those O2 sensors.
And just go into open loop at that point.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Let's do it. All right, so that last run was our final max effort horsepower run. So now the car is fully tuned for performance. So she came in with 349 horsepower, 355 pound-feet of torque. And now we have 364 and 366. So a pretty awesome gain for just some strokes on the keyboard and just a little bit of know-how. All right, guys, so we zipped the stock tune file in just for testing purposes. And just to show you that at our test speed, about 60 miles an hour, we are right around that 14.7, 15 to 1 air fuel, that number right there. And this is basically what every single car is going to run at when it's just normally cruising and the engine is warmed up. So now we are going to go ahead and modify the tune file, lean it out a little bit, and see what we come up with. So we are in 6th gear on the dyno. It's running at about 1350-ish RPM. And Mike has already taken out a bunch of fuel right at our test cruising speed, which is right at about 60 miles an hour. This engine RPM is not correct. This is scaled up for 4th gear, so don't worry about that right now. But what we're looking at is this number right here. That is the AFR. So on a stock car, it's going to be running at 14.7 to 1. We have it in the mid to upper 17 to 1 air fuel ratio range. So this is using a lot less fuel right now, but we might go ahead and add in a little bit more just to keep temperatures in check. Our coolant temperature has not gone up really much at all, and we don't even have the fan going on, so it's keeping up with this. We've been running the car for roughly 15-20 minutes just to kind of test this out. You can definitely tell though, when it goes into lean burn mode, that the car just kind of feels a little bit differently, a little bit like it's chugging. So we might add a little bit more fuel in there, and we're just playing with it right now. But something else is we did end up having to run this in open loop, so it's disregarding those front O2 sensors. It just wasn't making the adjustment we needed in closed loop. It's something in the computer that was kind of like kicking it out. So what we have done now is run the wideband O2 sensor. You can see the cord there to one of the bungs in the front because we're not using those O2 sensors anymore. So anyway, Mike's gonna make some more adjustments. We're gonna continue to test here and see how she does engine temperature wise and just generally how the engine is running. So Mike has added 6% fuel back in. He said the car isn't chugging at all anymore. Before you could tell it was running a little weird. And something else to note, kind of hard to see, but that temperature gauge right there with the factory file was at about 220 degrees while cruising, which is normal. Mike messed around with the fan settings and now we're at about 198. So we just lowered the temperature. Obviously more heat is better for efficiency, but since we're running a higher AFR, we have to, or we want to kind of mitigate cylinder temperature as much as we can. So he's taken 6% out and we see a little decrease here in the real world AFR. It's gone down a little bit, but the car feels much better. So I think we're gonna stick with it at this AFR right now and just keep on running the engine for a little bit longer, just kind of testing things. And something else I wanna show you guys. So obviously this isn't as accurate as an EGT gauge. I don't know what this error means, but you guys can see, let me get a good shot here. So we're at about 517, 519 degrees. We're pointing it right on the exhaust manifold. So we just want to make sure it's not getting too hot, which it shouldn't. I mean, you can get well into the 800-900 degree range area and still be safe. On the diesel, we're running like 1400 degrees Fahrenheit in the EGT Pro on my Mercedes diesel, and it's fine. So we just want to make sure we're not going too crazy here. And I think honestly right now it's pretty perfect. The car is performing very well, and it should be using a lot less fuel since we have removed a ton of fuel in the tune. Mike, how did it feel on that last one?
It was a lot better than the first rendition where we took out a significant amount of fuel from the table. Just to err on the side of caution, with what the air fuel was, we were about 20% lean, and we were kind of shooting more towards 16-15%. So I want to give it just a little bit more fuel, and I think that's going to be a happy medium between fuel economy and as well as temperatures and drivability. Another part of it is that we have been able to put in about 44 degrees of timing in at that RPM under that load, which typically a stock file like this, or a car like this in factory form, would have anywhere between 32 and 34 degrees of timing. So we're anywhere from 12 to 10 degrees more timing at that small little part of the timing table than the factory setup would have been.
Okay, so with the increased timing, we're able to squeeze out more energy from that smaller amount of fuel.
Correct.
Okay, cool. And so right now, this is the table in HP Tuners where you're going to add in a little bit of fuel.
Yes, this is the primary VE table, and really the cell that we're reading at is this one right here. But we kind of want to cover a lot of the cells within that area without going too far. So I'm going to add 6% in that range right there, and you just do that by multiplying by 1.06 and hitting the multiply button. And then just to kind of smooth it out so it has a better transition to the other part of the table, we're just going to go ahead and do that and do that, and that will just kind of have it so it's not such a drastic dip. As you can see, if we go to the 3D map, that part of the table that we're in, we're just not having like a cliff fall. That part of the table is also very localized, where it's not going to be used very often other than when we're at 60 miles an hour in 6th gears. So it shouldn't affect the rest of the wide open throttle, which is red down here, or 4th, you know, 2nd, 3rd, 4th gear cruising's up in here. And when you go into the overdrive gears, you drop the RPM even further.
So this is where we get to have our cake and eat it too. We can have the power and the fuel economy because you don't need it in 6th gear cruising at 1300 RPM, you know? All right, so Mike has set the cruise control at 60, and that basically is activating our lean burn mode. And so here we go. This is exactly what we were looking for. Our air fuel is now right in that bottom 17 AFR range, and this is right at our test mile an hour of 60. So this is perfect, and especially with that increased timing, I mean, you can hear it. The car just sounds totally normal. It's not chugging or anything. We're going to let it run for a little bit longer. I'll check the temperature on the exhaust manifold. And again, that is not super accurate, but it'll just give us an idea if we're heating up too much. We're going to monitor the engine coolant temperature as well, and we're going to let her run just like this on the dyno for a little while. So I think this will do it as far as the tuning. And I have a very, very long drive home, so I'm going to be able to give you guys real-world results of what the Corvette is getting MPG-wise in this video.
So at this point, I think I'm very happy. I think Alex is going to be very happy with the results. With that AFR at that speed, in that gear, at that RPM, that engine load, we're using about 15% less fuel based on actual AFR readings with the wideband sensor. Not only that, since it's a very localized spot of the fuel map, that we're using that to gain that efficiency for miles per gallon, we're losing nothing when it comes to wide open throttle, feeling part throttle, acceleration, burnouts, dumping the clutch, all that's being able to maintain. Now, I've been doing this for a number of years, going on 20. I know I don't look it, but in that amount of time, I've done about 3,500 LS-based cars over the years, and I was just ecstatic to actually try and have the opportunity to give some of the theories I've been going on in my head practice. One thing that I have to say, I was kind of disappointed it didn't turn out the way I thought it would be, and I have not figured out the reason why, is why we weren't able to use the TPS modifier with the O2 sensors on and still have the best of both worlds. It's a small sacrifice, but in the end, I think it's going to work well.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and reset that, and we will reset our trip B, and let's just reset. Okay, reset both trips. We'll go back to fuel. Average. Okay, cool. So we are all set to go. Let's hop on the highway. All right, we're getting on the highway. I had to drive around to get to this on-ramp right now, as you can see. So we're starting off at 21.5, but we're not anywhere near lean burn right now. So just want to show you guys that I'm just getting on the highway like a normal person. I'm not really doing any kind of crazy eco driving right now. Actually, I should probably shift at this point. So anyway, let's get up to 60 in 6th gear, and I'm going to keep the camera rolling because I want to see if we can feel a difference when it goes into lean burn mode. So here we go, 6th gear, and we are right at 60, and I'm going to set the cruise. There we go. Let's go down right to 60. There we go, 60 miles an hour. We're in lean burn mode right now because we are up to operating temperature. I believe that is warm enough to get into it. And our trip is 2.1 miles. Actually, wow, it took me a little bit longer than I thought to get on the highway. All right, so I'm gonna try my hardest to go exactly 60 miles an hour the entire way home. Hopefully we don't hit any traffic. So we've gone a few more miles here. Let's check out our fuel at this point. And we are at 33.2. So even stock, this is pretty normal, I think. Actually, it got up there pretty quick compared to before, but we've been in this lean burn mode at 60 exactly for a little while now. So let's go back to the trip, and I'll see you guys at roughly 15 miles in. We have about 40 miles to go, so this should give us a pretty good result according to this. And comment down below if you guys have ever tested this factory system against calculating it by hand. How accurate is this? Does it read higher or lower? Let me know. Range on this thing is not bad. These Corvettes come with like a 19-gallon fuel tank, so 670 miles we can go so far on the roughly low 30 MPG rating that it's at right now. So not too bad. I think if we can really get this to 40 MPG, this thing will go, I don't know, 700 and something miles to a tank. All right, we just hit 15 miles on the trip, 60 miles an hour the entire time, outside of the 2 point whatever miles it took me to get to the highway. But let's see where we're at. 36.1 MPG, not bad. So hopefully that can go up. Oh, look at that, it went up a little bit live. So hopefully that'll go up even more. We'll see if we can get close to 40 on this trip. I don't know if that's possible. I don't even think I messed around with the tire pressure in a while. I think it's only at like 36. So anyway, this is looking pretty good so far. Let's check in at about 30 miles. Welcome to Chicago. We have hit traffic, of course. But anyway, we're at 27 miles. Let's hit the fuel thing. What are we at? 38.7. Wow. That is really, really good considering it took me a couple miles to get onto the highway. I wasn't driving it, very lightly, and now we're literally dead stopped in traffic. And I've had to slow down and speed up a few times since our last test. So this is pretty good. It's gonna start dropping now that we're sitting here not going anywhere, but 38 miles per gallon so far. We're sort of starting to move here, but we're all the way down to 36 MPG. So I don't know how much this is going to clear up. Hopefully it's not like this the entire ride home, but we do have a ton of construction always going on here on the highway. All right, we're about to get off the highway, and we ran into a little bit more traffic, but I'd say 75% of the trip roughly was in lean burn. So let's see where we're at now. 37.3, not bad at all. I've driven this car a lot. I drove it home from Kentucky. It was like a 5-6 hour drive, and I was going about 60, 65 the entire way, and it returned 31 MPG, and that was a steady state, no traffic type of situation, and the car's rated at about 28 MPG. So I definitely don't think that with a totally stock car you can maintain 37 MPG, and this would have gone up even more had we not hit the traffic. We were were in the mid 38s and it was still climbing. So I think that 40 MPG would have been possible if we kept going, but we will be testing even more. Make sure to follow me at LegitStreetCars on Instagram for quicker fuel economy updates. All right, guys, that'll do it for today's video. It has been a very, very long day, but I'm very excited with these results. I'm very excited for the tuning that Mike did on the dyno. That was a ton of fun. I learned a lot. I hope that you guys learned a lot, and we're gonna continue on here. So I have the same tuning software that Mike does, so I'll be able to make adjustments on the fly, and I might even put a wideband setup on this car myself so that we can log and fine-tune this thing even more. So I hope you guys are really into this project as much as I am, and if you like this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button, share the video, subscribe if you're new, and most importantly, have an awesome day. I'll catch all of you in the next video.